Don't engage alone. We do this together.
Yeah!
Yeah!
We got it! We got
New 52 booklet.
it! Somebody clip this.
Welcome to Under Two Capes, the premier podcast for Comics League. And I have a question for you all. Have you ever read a comic book event and when you're done with it, ask the very important question, why did this even happen? Because I have. I certainly have. And that's a question that we're going to discuss today on the episode. So for right now, it's just me. Hopefully, JJheat and Talati will show up. But if they don't, that's fine. So we're talking about the most pointless comic book events ever. So let's get right into it. All right. So we're going to talk about basically our time frame is the last 10 years. So we'll go off of that. We're going to start with, oh God, Civil War II. All right. Here is my problem with Civil War II, because not only was it a complete character assassination on Carol Danvers, but it also, see, here's the thing. Here's the thing about Civil War II. As a story, it's redeemed if you read the Steve Rogers Captain America tie-ins, because those indicate that Evil Steve manipulated the entire event in order to like divide the superhero community. So that's cool. But when you don't do that, it reads like a freaking cash grab. Because here's, you know what was coming out the same time when this event was coming out? Captain America Civil War. So they're like, okay, you know what? We need a Civil War movie, a comic book series to release at the same time in case the audience goes, I watched Captain America Civil War. This is based on comic books. Oh, I must read I must read the comics that this is based on to the comic book store. Which, by the way, unfortunately, that never happens. I wish it did, but it never happens. So, DC Rebirth. This was the worst, because here's why it was the worst. All right. Because, okay, so let me do a little context for you guys here. So in 2011, 2012, DC rebooted its continuity. Basically said, pretend like we never, ever published a comic book. And pretend like this is the first time we're starting it. So they started that. Yeah, this is where you have like Superman and Wonder Woman being a couple, which is awesome. And then you have like introduction of Jessica Cruz, Cyborg on the Justice League. A lot of Snyderverse inspiration was from this. You also have the Batgirl of Burnside. So what they did was, so DC started listening to people on Twitter that don't read the comics and were like, that's not my characters. My characters would never do that or whatever. So they did Rebirth, which was designed to completely wipe the slate clean of New 52. Now, this book, this article on CBR that I'm going off of for right now lists a different reason for why Rebirth sucked. But here's why I think it sucked. Because it was vindictive. You were basically telling all the fans that came on and like the New 52, yeah, you're not welcome here anymore. All you people that came on because of Superman and Wonder Woman, yeah, go away. And when you do that to your audience that you gained because of this, because any comic book shop owner will tell you that the New 52 was a massive success for sales. Yes, you heard that right. A massive success. So the issue here is that when you're telling your audience not that this era that they loved, that was selling well, was a mistake, that's when you alienate your audience. And Lord knows DC and Marvel do that all the time. Now, moving on here. So they say it's because with Rebirth, it was attempting to like revitalize things, but everything became so prolonged. Then you had Doomsday Clock getting delayed 10 years, it seems. So eventually, because Doomsday Clock was supposed to be like the final event of Rebirth that would like rebuild everything, it didn't. In fact, it's debatable if it's even in canon, but it's still interesting though. We're going to the next event that was useless. Let me be clear on this. Here's a useless event. I am going to go with Night Terrors. Now, here's why Night Terrors is the biggest mistake DC has done so far, even this year. Because, all right, DC relaunched with Dawn of DC. They were trying to go back to more classic storytelling, and they were succeeding. Here is the interesting thing. DC always does this. They literally always, they always squander their potential and their, I'm trying to think of the right word. They squander, whenever they get momentum, they do stuff to sabotage. They self-sabotage, essentially. So what DC did was, in the middle of Dawn of DC, you had great stories with Superman becoming the head of LexCorp, calling it Supercorp. You got Batman hanging out with the Bat family. You got Green Lantern, which was so good. Jeremy Adams on Green Lantern is fantastic. So DC all of a sudden decides, let's cease all those stories and let's, in the biggest boneheaded decision ever, let's put this on hold for 2 months and start this really useless storyline that had zero effect on DC. Really zero. And then at the end of it, they try and cram in all these like hints at what's going on with DC. Like, oh my gosh, that anti-Amazon legislation just passed there by teasing Tom King's Wonder Woman. But I'm like, that's what are you doing? It makes no sense, DC. So that's why I think Night Terrors will go down as one of the most pointless events ever. Now, the next one, and this is another one that I picked, and it's one of those things. I like this comic book. I count this as an event. I like this comic book. The problem with it is that, okay, it's Heroes in Crisis. And here's why it's pointless. The only effect it had was the character assassinate a character, and they could have done a lot of cool stuff with the aftermath. Because what they could have done is they could have made it so basically Lois Lane, being the Lois Lane she is, releases the secret identity information of the personal information of a bunch of superheroes that were going to Sanctuary. Now, what they could have done is shown like the aftermath of that. But did DC do that? And it just astounds me that all this stuff keeps getting greenlit and no one thinks, okay, this is a bad idea. Next up, we are going to do, so I'm going through a little event. So we're going to do some Marvel stuff right now. We're switching over to Marvel. We're going to go with Ultimatum. All right, here's why Ultimatum was the pointless and worst event ever. Because it was because I get that Ultimate Comics like went down in sales, but then you like literally break Ultimate Comics in one of the worst Marvel storylines ever. That ultimately, because it's Elseworlds, didn't really have an effect. So I was like, the only effect it did was essentially make people like hate the Ultimate Universe, which I'm like, okay. Next event that I think was pointless was, to a degree, I'm going to agree with this one. I'm going to go with One More Day. Now, we're going to talk about this. And yeah, so what was One More Day? So One More Day. So throughout J. Michael Straczynski's Spider-Man run, there's been all these, there was all these efforts to like undermine Peter. I don't blame J. Michael for this. I blame Marvel Editorial, as I blame for most of the issues with comics. So what they wanted to do, they wanted to essentially, so they wanted to, what's the word? They wanted to have like the younger bachelor Peter Parker that people could identify with. So what they did, all right. So it starts off with Civil War. And one of the consequences of Civil War is Peter Parker reveals his secret identity to the world. Spoiler alert, it doesn't turn out that well, and Aunt May is attacked and on death's door. So Peter makes a deal with the literal devil. The deal is Aunt May lives, but his marriage to Mary Jane, which, by the way, Mary Jane and Peter still remember, is wiped from continuity. So, yeah, that is one of the events that here's that again, speaking of not listening to your fans, that the fans have been railing to undo, but Marvel Editorial literally, for some reason, they are the most stubborn group of people I have ever seen, besides Warner Brothers, that they won't go with something that clearly the fan base wants. I just don't, I really, at times, I really don't understand. So, next up, the event that I think, okay, here's the other pointless events for, also in Marvel, the Hellfire Galas. Okay, here's why these are useless. They serve zero purpose really into the overall story, and they exist purely because the Marvel editorial staff, for some reason, probably never got invited to a prom, so they want to do so they essentially want to self-insert, which is the most stupid thing ever because it serves no purpose in the story, just to see, hey, let's bring in like Kevin Feige in a Marvel comic. Let's have the Avengers show up. It's just stupid. It makes no sense, as do most events not written by Jonathan Hickman. Here's why I say they're pointless. Because they're pointless to the story that Jonathan Hickman started. And here's the problem with the X Office, what they did. This is why technically House of X Powers of 10 was pointless. It was still good, but here's why it was pointless. And this is not due to Hickman. This is due to Marvel undermining him. Because here's the thing. So what happened was he came in, he revitalized the X-Men. This was the Krakoan age. And, all right, so what happened was Hickman had to leave because they once he got them on the island, Marvel literally rejected every idea he had. So he was like, I'm out. See you later. Following that, Jordan White took over the X Office and ran it into the ground. Like there was like so many events so many things happening here that didn't even remotely relate to Hickman's story or didn't even link accidentally. And they were just kind of on the side there, just on the side. And I'm looking at this because I have a bunch of the Dawn of X trades. I lost interest around, I'd say, volume 4 of the Dawn of X trades. Because I'm like, I want to see like all the storylines that Hickman started with House of X. I want to see like all the Sentinels and all that stuff. But they were like, no, let's watch the X-Men go to prom. Yeah. So moving on. Another pointless event, a lot of these are going to actually be DC, so I'm just going to go with that, is Amazon's attack. And JHeat's going to be here soon, so he and I can talk about it. Here's the problem with Amazon's attack. Is it's literally a story to set up Final Crisis, and that's part of it's taking place, I believe, at the same time as Countdown. And the thing about it, so DC has, for some reason, never been able to get Wonder Woman right. They've tried to, don't get me wrong, just they never are able to because they never put their top tier artists artists, yes. They never put their top tier writers before Tom King. And sad because guess what? She's the third member of the frickin' Trinity, the face of your company besides Superman and Batman. She should have a little bit more respect, but this is not a Wonder Woman video. So Amazon's attack. So what happens in this event? So the goddess Athena resurrects. Is it the goddess Athena? The goddess Hera, one of the goddesses, resurrects Hippolyta and tells her, oh, man's world kidnapped your daughter. You have to go to war with them. So they do that. And Amazon slaughters civilians. The Justice League shows up. And Sal from Comic Pop had like the perfect rant for this story. Because on the Justice League, let's do a roll call on who's in here. Superman, Green Lantern, Black Canary. All right, so any of these characters, let me put it this way, Superman and Green Lantern especially could completely resolve the situation. Like he could fly people into the sun. Green Lantern could just drop a giant cage over all the Amazons and all their mythical beasts and take care of them. That's it. But no, they just stick to fighting regular wars. And I'm like, well, that's stupid. So then, okay, this is the stupidest part of the story. So eventually Wonder Woman breaks out and she meets her mother. And it looks like she's about to negotiate with her mother for peace. Superman picks her up, picks Wonder Woman up, brings her to Batman for the reason to strategize in the war. So they essentially took Wonder Woman away from talking her mother down, brought her to Batman, and went, what are we going to do about Hippolyta? And I'm reading this, and I'm like, what did I just read? On top of that, you have a bunch of other useless stories. And then you have this weird Donna Troy, Jason Todd conversation, which is referencing what's going on in Countdown. But the thing is, it's happening in Amazon's attack. And the funny thing is, by the way, in the trade of Amazon's attack, they did this really poorly. They explain what's going on in the other books in like little text pages. It's like you're reading comic, novel, comic, novel. And it's just so jarring. So that was 100% pointless and stupid as hell. And it ends with it revealing Athena is Granny Goodness somehow. Somehow the new gods captured the Greek gods and were posing as them. Because that makes a lot of sense. It just astounds me about the level of editorial incompetence of this event. So staying with DC, the other useless event, the pointless, I would have to say, is probably, I'm not going to say Dark Crisis, because ultimately that did lead to I'm going to say Dark Knight's Death Metal. Here's why. Because that led to, it did have effects, but it had the wrong effects. Here's what I mean by that. Okay, so the thing of Death Metal, the main thesis, everything is canon. If they didn't mean this, they did a really bad job explaining it. So here's what they did. So Wonder Woman is fighting the Batman Who Laughs, another character who was completely run to the ground, by the way, by DC, but we'll talk about that maybe in a future video. So what they did was Wonder Woman restores the DC character's memory of literally everything that's happened to them. So all their contradictory, like, origins are all canon. So I'm like, Wonder Woman has had like 5 different origins in the past 10 years. Which one is canon? Oh, they're all canon. But they can't, because they directly contradict. Either she's the goddess, the daughter of Zeus, or the thing of clay. And you're telling me she's both. That doesn't make sense. But according to DC, oh no, it makes sense. And I'm like, okay, but the excuse, I've heard a lot of people come at me with this, was saying, well, it's not actually canon. It's not actually everything's canon. What they meant was that there's a thing in the there's a world in the multiverse where everything happened. And I'm like, if that's true, how come Wonder Woman was like restoring the memories of all the DC characters? Okay. And also that was the event that came out during COVID. And the thing about it is it came out and then DC had to like delay a bunch of events. So they decided to stretch it with like so many tie-ins and it burnt out your audience. That's the other thing DC did. They massively burnt out their audience and sales honestly haven't recovered that well. And it's really stupid. It's really, really, really stupid. And it makes zero sense what DC does with this. Then you have Gotham War. All right, so let's talk about Gotham War. What's going on right now. Now, granted, this event could end really, really well. But the thing is, I don't think it will. The reason why I don't think it, because it makes zero sense. Here's the basis of Gotham War. So Catwoman rounds up all of the super villains and said, you all work for me. What we're going to do, we're going to allow some petty crime, but we're not going to allow like murders and such. Okay, you're still allowing crime. The part that completely and utterly vexes me is the fact that the Bat family, about everyone but Damian, goes along with the plan. Like, literally, they are fighting Batman. And JHEAT's here. And JHEAT, so we're talking about useless comic events, and I'm talking about so far about how Gotham War is like the most useless thing I've ever seen.
Okay, let me break down Gotham War
Go
in a
ahead.
very sophisticated fashion. You have a man and a woman in an on and off relationship. They can never find a way to make it work. Then one drastically ends up in a supernatural coma, and oh, I'm going to solve his mission for you. That way, does it get in the way of our relationship? Only for the whole thing to blow up in her face, and a lot of people end up unalived. Oh,
And
wait.
the thing is,
That was
wait.
Batman thing 15 years ago.
And wait a second, JHEAT. The Bat family is on Catwoman's side.
Now, see, this is where I draw. Okay, that's a common misconception. Now, this is the one credit I will give Gotham War. Only one. And that is the fact that they're trying to set up Zur-En-Arrh in Detective Comics and how he's taking over in a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde situation. And the fact that he's running himself ragged, crisis event or supernatural event, one comic book event after another. Eventually, Zur-En-Arrh is going to win out because Bruce is constantly running ragged. He can't keep his darker impulses in check. So I get that type of story, but you're putting too much in one. This is a self-contained crossover series.
But the thing is, here's the problem, JHEAT. The Bat family is letting crime happen.
Again, that's the bottom line here. That's where I draw the line in the sand. They're trying to spin it as if Nightwing, Oracle, they're trying to be neutral, but Bruce is starting to go off the deep end. Zur-En-Arrh is starting to take over, and that's going to carry over into Detective Comics because we saw from the solicitation, that's where they're headed. But at the same time, they would never do this. This literally is just a lover spat with the Bat family and City of Gotham caught in the middle. That's all this is.
Mm-hmm.
Jason siding with Selina, I could see that.
But
the
Nightwing
rest?
And
No.
Tim Drake and Stephanie Brown. I'm reading this.
Stephanie Brown, maybe.
I'm reading this and I'm like, what the hell did I just read? I almost well, let me put it this way, JHEAT. I had this reaction one time before in a previous event that I just talked about, but I'm going to get your thoughts on here because I love to bring this up around you. Amazon's attack.
One was editorially mandated. This is just a desperate crossover to boost numbers.
Yeah. So
you're comparing apples and oranges, Jared. I understand what you're trying to do.
No, but I'm saying I've only reacted this way to a previous event, and that was Amazon's attack. And I'm like, the heck is this?
Now, I could be wrong, but so far with Tom King's Wonder Woman #1, this Sovereign arc with the lasso of lies, I feel like this is a redundant story outside of setting up Amazon's attack with an exclamation mark.
To be clear, I think it could be, there's potential there. Now, will Tom King live up to that potential? That's an entirely different story.
Heroes in Crisis.
He can't do worse than Clunrad. I will maintain that to my grave. He cannot do worse than the previous team. It's literally impossible.
A slightly above hack is still a hack.
He's not a hack, but
okay. It's your show. I'll let you have it.
I mentioned a bunch of events, comic book events that I felt were pointless. So let me run a few by you now that you're here. Death metal.
Yes, because outside of 5G setup, there was no point of that story. I will give
except
you that.
to say everything is canon, which makes zero.
Which is DCYOU all over again, trying to focus on more story for story's sake. You tried this with DCYOU as a transition period as you were moving studios, and half your books tanked with only a handful of exceptions.
That's an excellent point to start. Let's go to New 52 events. All right. Future's End. Just getting up and walk. For those of you that are watching, that are listening to the audio, JHEAT has now gotten up out of his chair and walked off the show. So we're going to talk about briefly why this is a useless event. And JHEAT, I'm not going to tell you it's good. We're just talking about how it's pointless, so we can rant about it. That's the fun part. We can rant about Future's End and the fact that it's a Terminator. It has zero effect on the timeline.
No. The fact that you would even compare the worst Terminator movie to this is it still a travesty.
There's no way. No, this is way better than Dark Fate.
No, not by much.
Not by much, but it is better.
Even so, we all knew the New 52 was going to crash and burn, but this officially killed it.
No, it was DCU that killed it, but more on that later.
It was set up for Convergence, basically, but that's a separate conversation.
There's another one, Convergence, that exists for the sole purpose of them to be able to put books out while they're moving offices. That's why. And
if you want an entire line of shelf titles, congratulations. You were in 2015.
There you go. And the thing about it could have been cool. Like bringing back all these different cities and worlds, the Earth 2 people. But it was just bland.
Poorly executed.
And then Earth Prime has zero to do in the story. It just shows up and they go, hey, there's the New 52 over there.
And we tried something different with New Direction Verse. Hey, I had to get it out there. To where we kind of like merged the two. Like you still have a few constants or doppelgangers who carried over, such as Clark, New 50 Post-Crisis Clark, Wally West. Basically a smoother transition, and then over the course of a 2-year character arc, God Killer, you kind of ease into the rebirth material. But if you want to know more about that, we'll leave a playlist in the description.
And to tease you guys to check out that description, I'm going to say 4 words to tease God Killer 2. Red Lantern Wonder Woman. That's all I have to say. And yes, it will be in the description below. So, next useless event, DCU.
So an entire line of shelf titles for over the, a 7-month period?
Because the overall idea of this was story over continuity. But the problem with it is that the stories have to be good. And New 52 Superman already had a bad reputation. But you just dug a hole in it. Then you tried to force this into the popular Superman and Wonder Woman book and create a drama out of thin air.
You're never going to let Tomasi on Volume 4 go.
Never, because he tanked a 100,000 copy selling book.
Hey, from an optics standpoint, that's unforgivable. I got to give you that.
For the express purpose, not because of sales, but because they wanted to put him back with Lois. That's it. Not because of what the fans wanted, what they wanted.
Well, really to restore the status quo and write off nostalgia, but that's a separate conversation.
Yeah, that'll be a separate one. But the point is, now to be clear, you had some kind of decent ideas here, like a Jim Gordon Batman.
Earth 2 saga, Patrick Gleason's Robin, son of Batman with Damian going on a redemption arc.
Was this when a Batgirl Burnside series was going on?
Roughly around the same time. This kind of
that was good.
Robin War, Court of Owls. Now, Batgirl Burnside kind of fell apart by the time you get to Volume 4, but for the most of it, that run was solid.
Yeah, it was really good. You put a Barbara in a new situation. You take away all her gear. She has to homemake it, which is super dope. You also had Grayson, so they revealed Nightwing's identity, but then they turned him into a spy, which honestly was kind of cool.
It could work.
It could work, particularly when it was written by Tom King, who was an actual spy. But the thing about it is that then they're going back. So these events have no effect. So I'm like, why do I care about any of these if I know that they're just going to go back?
See, this is why I never made the thumbnail yet, but I was going to pitch this to you for New Direction Verse. And if you've been following along, let's just say Batman gets ensnared by Poison Ivy to take on a certain clown.
Yes, it's really good.
So we're replacing Forever Evil with what Poison Ivy makes Batman do. Mm-hmm. Grayson still goes on to be a super spy working for Spiral for a year and a half. You get Starfire returning to Earth, and basically spoilers. But that's all I'm going to say. That's all I'm going to say.
But so I believe those are the new 52 events that were pointless, because there were a few in there that were awesome, like Darkseid War. I will still maintain that's one of the best DC events of all time.
The majority of Jeff Johns' New 52 Aquaman, that was pretty solid. It actually redeemed the character in a lot of people's eyes. So,
oh my god, I just completed that omnibus. Good lord, that book is amazing. So let's go. Let me ask you this: which Crisis event is the most pointless?
Are we picking editorially or continuity-wise?
We can go both.
Okay, editorially-wise, I'd argue Flashpoint, because really they just seized an open opportunity to mainstream.
Okay.
I'd argue Flashpoint. The setup was there, mind you. The setup is there, but this was originally a self-contained story you editorial mandated to oblivion, and you did not have a cohesive plan.
Okay, they did at the beginning. The problem is the plan fell apart because they put
miscommunication and a template that only lasted a couple of months.
Yeah, to a degree, and this is what Britt and I say on the on Super Wonder Legacy. Was the New 52 perfect? Hell no. But did it succeed in its mission on bringing a lot of people to DC? Yeah.
It did what it was supposed to do.
Sales? Yeah. So when people say it was a failure, I'm like, actually, it achieved everything it was meant to do.
You don't have to like it, but from a commercial standpoint, New 52 did its job.
And by the way, my least favorite DC event is Rebirth.
The return of Wally West, you're going to piss a lot of people off.
No, not that part. The part where it became a vindictive, screw the New 52.
We fixed this with New Direction verse, Jared, but I'll let you say these.
We did, but I'm just saying, in the regular DC canon, in the crap canon, as I call it, they literally told the fans of New 52, go away. They essentially swatted away their new fans and said, no, fans that previously didn't really buy the books, come back, Twitter. We want those likes and retweets. And did it work?
Okay, Rebirth did decent. They even surpassed Marvel when Marvel Now and All New, All Different was going on.
Well, that's not hard to do.
It's a low bar, but from a metric standpoint, Rebirth did decent numbers. Was it doing New 52 numbers? Probably a little more, not by much.
No, it wasn't, as a matter of fact. A lot of comic book stores have come out and said, no, Rebirth was a dud.
Then forget my language. But,
and here's the thing, when you think about it, didn't the New 52 last longer than Rebirth?
New 52 lasted roughly 3.5 years, 4 if you're counting the decline from Future's End all the way to Convergence.
I count up until like maybe Darkseid War.
So about 3 years.
Mm-hmm. And Rebirth?
Rebirth lasted 2. At least 2.
By the way, isn't it kind of funny how in the Superpowered documentary on HBO Max, they literally ignore Rebirth?
Because all it was a PR tour for the most part.
Yeah,
Like,
and they were so happy and so congratulatory about the new Fit 52. I'm like, wait, I was right.
and Tevia, because I know he's going to say something in the comments. Tevia, you did get Super Sons out of Rebirth, but that book was going to come out regardless.
And Tevia, I get that you like that book, but just because you like it doesn't mean everyone else liked it.
And even then, that series peaked at like 75, right at 80,000.
Because here's the thing. If it sold well enough, they would have made Bendis DH John at the end of his arc. They would not have let him keep it. They would not have let him age him up, period.
No, that's a separate matter because you still have Connor Kent, who's a clone of Superman, which ties into the Siegel family. So if you're going to do a whole new generation Superman, but still not pay extra money in royalties and licensing to get at to avoid disputes.
But what I mean is that they would have done the way that we all wanted them to do, which is not age him up, but let us grow up with him.
Yeah, I agree that the age up probably wouldn't have happened if you had to wait 5 years and multiple Elseworld stories just to even get a Super Sons movie off the ground.
And that is why I always say everything connected to Lois Lane always sells poorly. Yes, I'm going to say that.
Okay, you're just drifting at this point.
I can't pass up that up. It's low-hanging fruit, JHEAT. Low-hanging fruit.
Hey, I'm not trying to start a purity war, let alone a shit war. Nope. I've been through my fair share. Bleach and Naruto, y'all remember on them forums back in the day when Bleach and Naruto were wrapping up. They were animals.
Yeah. So, but the thing is, all right. So, oh yeah, we were talking about which crisis event is the most useless. Honestly, I gotta say, I'm not gonna say Identity Crisis because that actually led into a crisis, another crisis.
It's a prelude.
Counts. That counts. So that's good. I'd have to say 0 Hour.
0 Hour is kind of a reshuffling of the board, but I get your point.
Because it was like, okay, you wanted to. It was their way of rebooting again immediately after Crisis on Infinite Earths, and I'm like, so it's redundant, is what it is.
They were trying to shuffle and remove inconsistencies, such as trying to merge Power Girl into the New Earth. And I'm just like,
but you should have done this with Crisis.
And even then, the DCAU had to fix it literally a decade later by just making Galatea, which is essentially a Connor stand-in, but still a clone of Kara.
The DCAU always did that when they combined two characters. Like hell, Kyle Rayner got pretty much got the Hal Jordan origin.
Pretty much.
But yeah, in terms of most pointless crisis, I still say Heroes in Crisis. While I enjoy the overall story, what effect besides destroying Wally West did it really have in the overall DC universe?
They were trying to turn even I have to go to the Future State books for this. Lord help me. But
that's a pointless event right there too. We'll talk about that in a second.
But you were talking about so you had Jeff Johns bring Barry back because of nostalgia in the Arrowverse, CW, blah 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 blah. Wally's not as promised as he used to be, but he's still a fan favorite and a legacy character. What do we do with him? We make him a villain.
The character everyone loves.
And I'm just like, if you really wanted a murder mystery allegory, even you had Eobard Thawne. You even later retconned it with Savitar breaking out the Speed Force, causing a chain reaction. Just pin it on them.
What they should have done is made it so that Wally was a white Martian. Because then shapeshift.
That could work.
It's not Wally then. It's not Wally then. It was someone posing as him. There you go. And then they could have just like secret invasioned him, and then he comes back at like the darkest hour to save people because they labeled him the hope of the DC universe.
I think, and even if you with Jeff Johns' new Golden Age line, everything got reshuffled trying to set up 5G. So a lot of that was just what happened with Heroes in Crisis and Wally was just collateral damage.
Yeah. So that's why I say if you ignore the Wally West parts, if you read this book in a vacuum, Heroes in Crisis is not as bad as people think it is.
It's still pretty bad because you have a limited series of characters, character inconsistencies.
The one part as a defender of heroes in crisis as I am, the one part that I cannot defend is Harley Quinn taking down the Trinity. That's where I draw the line.
I get you want to push this character. She's super popular. She's a survivor. All this stuff. Great character writing, depending on who's writing her. But the Trinity, come on. Batman, maybe. Superman, if she had kryptonite in advance. Wonder Woman, hell no.
She didn't have kryptonite. And it was like the stupidest thing in the world. I'm like, and then even Superman says, she's good, Bruce, maybe even better than you. And I'm like, what the hell, dude?
All you did was grab the lasso and pin him to the ground for a few seconds.
Yeah. So moving on, we talked about Future State. All right. So here's the thing about Future State. Future State was literally 5G, but we can't do 5G. We can't call it 5G, but we're going to do a lot of the plot lines of 5G because we already have the art done for it. We can't just cancel it. We're not David Zaslav.
Me personally, I would have took that tax write-off. Just, hey, we're going to go on a couple month hiatus, restructure some things.
I would have said we'll still pay the artists for their work because they still did the work.
Yeah, you'll get a buyout. You'll get a buyout if you don't.
You can release it on. You can show it on your social media. I don't care. We're not publishing this.
Or at the very least, make it strictly digital release on the app.
The problem with this, JHEAT, is that it works better as an Elseworld story. Because here's the problem with telling stories in the future. All the stories that we're reading right now that take place in the modern day have no stakes. Because we know, first off, all these characters are going to survive up until Future State. And then we know what's going to happen to them.
Fair point.
It makes zero sense. And it's
and I got to go back. And I'm pulling it. I have the 5G, perfect 5G, bleeding cool 5G files on me right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I know Tubby is, first of all, I can't stand Damian Wayne, but even I know lazy writing when I see it.
Mm-hmm.
You have a 14-year-old boy going off the deep end, being basically ripping off old wounds from BTAS. And then all of a sudden he becomes a villain gallivanting the league, clashing with John Kent, Magneto versus Professor X style.
Oh my God.
And I'm just like, what the? You might have to bleep me out for this, but
no, it's fine. But wasn't that also in keeping with his main continuity storylines where he was forming a prison camp, basically
being proactive? Like, okay, we have, rather than just being reactionary, waiting for things to happen, we could actually catch them in the act and then broker a deal with more secure facilities like Belle Reve, or basically not revolving doors like Blackgate or Arkham. Which is fine, but depending on how you go about it, it's inhumane.
Yeah.
Depending on how you go about it. And even then, any deal of a government contract of dealing with these villains would have fallen apart the moment, spoilers for the Adam Glass run, by the way, the moment Roundhouse betrayed the team and let the villains out in an attempt to kill him.
So you said Adam Glass.
Why did you say that name?
I walked right into that, but my point
Thank you. I like to keep that man's name out of my podcast, but thanks a lot. But
hey, you can always edit it out. So
here's the thing. Future State gave us Superman as a gladiator, so let's be happy about that. That was dope.
Still say World War Saga would have kicked off regardless.
World War Saga is way better. I will give you that. And by the way, isn't it interesting that the best Superman event of the past 10 years really doesn't involve Lois Lane? Yes, I'm going to say that again. But and you also have like the immortal Wonder Woman, and we also got Yara Flor out of there. So I'm not going to say it's all bad.
No.
But
they just kind of
overall event was one of the worst things ever. And then you have, it's followed by the publishing initiative that was very pointless, Infinite Frontier.
Infinite Frontier is just death metal calling a do-over. I'm just going to say it.
And you know what? I would argue more damage was done to the DC brand during this time than was since Flashpoint.
That's a high ball. I see where you're coming from, but that's a high ball.
Because you have characters because even if it's not main continuity, you have a lot of books being published around this time, like Batman flying away from people looting, characters acting wholly out of character. You have the entire Tom Taylor, John Kent series. And
self-title gone bad.
Self-title gone bad. Exactly. Shelf-title. You have that Teen Titans Academy series. You have any book with Megan Fitzmartin's name on it. It's
God,
just
the cringe.
again, it's literally one bad day after another.
One bad day is a travesty. This is just this is just shelf titles being crapped out for the hell of it.
JHEAT, it's one bad publishing initiative. One bad initiative. There you go. That's what I'm going to call it. One bad initiative. That's what it is. That's what this.
We need to get that trending. Jesus Christ.
That would be so good. Oh man. But it's just, that's all I could say for that. And Dawn of DC was good. They were starting to gain back some cachet. And then I said this earlier in the podcast before you came in. Then they literally told everyone, stop, read this pointless story.
Now, if you're going to cram a storyline or do some setup for some larger events, that's fine if you time it right. Let's us go through a couple of months, at least a fiscal year, before you crap out a crossover / big line-wide storyline just to sell as many #1 issues. The collector's market will only get you so far. That's all, to make it long story short.
According to Big Bang Comics, it's a comic book store and stuff, they said, hey guys, here is Dawn of DC. We're launching some cool titles and not publishing them for 2 months. And they go, unsurprisingly, the Night Terrors event seems to have killed the Dawn of DC momentum that DC was having. Sales for like Green Lantern last week were a big oof. And that's big because Green Lantern is actually one of the most solid series of Dawn of DC. It's really dope.
And to be fair, this isn't really impacting the books directly. They didn't get no tie-ins. You literally had self-contained 2-parters for each character while Night Terrors was going on. So the main books weren't even being affected. They were just on a 2-month hiatus.
And the thing is, the worst part is that you'd read, it's like, I remember vividly, I was reading the Superman books and the action books because I genuinely was enjoying them. They're fantastic. Then I get to the end of the issue and it says to be continued after Night Terrors. And I'm like, what do you mean after? You literally stop in the middle of an arc, JHEAT.
Because then the nightmare wave hits and everyone falls asleep, and they really should have just.
JHEAT, it astounds me about how this level of incompetence is in DC films and comics, because you literally had an event where fans were rebuilding the hype. You were getting people back. Then you said, no, we're done.
Now, this is the best way I can explain it from a sales standpoint. We're close to the end of the fiscal year for the first half of 2023. We need to prop up the numbers a little bit. The story doesn't have to be good. Just crap out as much tie-ins as humanly possible.
Yeah, but by the way, that was the other thing. That freaking tie-in sheet, like
43 issues. Jesus Christ. And only like 3 of them were relevant.
I was looking at that sheet and I got a heart attack because I'm like, I gotta buy all this crap. I didn't. I only got one I think I got Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman. That's it.
And I'd argue the Trinity had the most relevant. Even Aquaman did a little bit of Night Terrors, but he was a backup in Superman's tie-in.
I will say, there was one book that came out during the Night Terrors event that is so freaking dope. It is Doomsday King of Hell. Have you read that book?
I have read it.
It is so good. We have to do a discussion about that on Comics Day because, oh my gosh, did they strike gold with that? I want to see more of Doomsday as the King of Hell. It's just that one scene where they're talking, and all of a sudden you see like Doomsday come through a wall, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's Doomsday. It was just so cool.
But he's got nothing better to do.
Yeah, exactly. So, on that note, I think that's a good place to leave it, JHEAT. Thank you for joining us. Do you have any like closing thoughts on like all these useless events that DC and Marvel have had? Because I talked about Ultimatum, I talked about One More Day.
A lot of these pointless or lackluster events are either editorial mandates or shelf titles that have gone horribly wrong. A lot of them. But even then, the main problem in the comic book industry is that they can't get with the times. They're trying to focus more on Netflix and the streaming wars and adaptations. Eventually, you're going to run out of material. And I get it. You don't want to go the extra mile. Especially Warner Brothers, who's technically in a tremendous amount of debt right now. I understand it from a business standpoint. But if you want quality writers to be commissioned and contract your characters, you got to give them something, a royalty deal, something decent, maybe a small percentage of the adaptation, something. Hell, even the guy who wrote Infinity Gauntlet only got a couple thousand for Infinity War and Endgame, and he was pissed.
Brubaker got deadly squat for Winter Soldier and Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
But I'd be more insulted for not getting anything for Winter Soldier. I mean...
Well, no, what I mean is that he barely got any royalties from Falcon the Winter Soldier, even though he invented half the characters. And I was like, if there's one, it just astounds me. And I echo everything JHeat says. You know, it's kind of funny. The worst events have been the ones that are clearly editorial mandated. And you can tell it
right off
10
the page.
miles away, right off page 1 of the first issue of these events. You can be like, okay, I'm done.
Yep, this is editorially mandated.
Yep, 100%. More on that in a future stream. So, JHeat, where can we find you and what have you got coming on the channel?
Well, you can find me at JHeat Blaze on Twitter, JJheat75 on Twitter or X, but I refuse to call it that. But I have my review of Overlord Season 3 with Nick Lenz this Sunday. My Swole Tour videos are still coming up. Hopefully, I can get one more. I can get Superman, My Adventures of Superman Part 2, episodes 6 to 10 review. But because once Insomniac Spider-Man 2 comes out, a lot of us are going to cut back to play that game, especially Taladia. So hopefully I can get Anime Blazing Shonen out before then. But you'll also see me on CLD. New Direction Verse. Now, we did wrap up Season 1 with God Killer 2 recently, but there are a couple of video ideas that take place before that. So you will see New Direction Verse again in the future. And then once we get all those titles out, I'll make one big playlist, New Direction Verse Volume 1 or Season 1, and then you'll get the whole thing from beginning to end.
You can title it New Direction Verse Omnibus Volume 1. That would be an omnibus like that big. Jeez, we cooked, my friend. We cooked.
Indeed. Jared, what you got coming up?
So, okay, so we got Back to the Future for movie night. Hell yeah. Then we've got Super Wonder Legacy with Britt, where we're talking about Elseworld stories that features Super Wonder. In fact, she emailed me and she goes, I forgot how many Elseworld stories there were that feature this couple. Oh my gosh.
A lot of them were Superman and Wonder Woman. A lot of Elseworld stories. The only ones in recent history that didn't go that route were Deceased, DC versus Vampires, and
technically DC versus Vampires did, because she turned him into a vampire. Does that count?
That was a flirt. That was a flirty banter and attempt to bite him. But again, that's only a couple of pages.
Mm-hmm. Or here's another one: Dark Knights of Steel. That's
an original variant of Supergirl, but I'll give you that.
No, but what I mean is that she's not with Clark.
It's still Super Wonder, just not Clark.
Technically still Super Wonder, so I guess that counts. I'll ask Britt if that counts. But in terms of Indie Wednesday, I believe I'm interviewing some comic creators next week, and then I'm talking about Ty the Art Guy's book, which is titled The Undying Chronicle. I just completed today. It's pretty freaking good. I got John from Beyond Comics coming on the show tomorrow. As a matter of fact, at 4 p.m., we're going to be doing a live interview. Actually, by the time this comes out, it'll be in 1 hour from now. So there you go. And let's see, what else am I doing?
And we recently collabed with the creators of Boob of Steel. Hopefully I didn't butcher that.
It's on the channel, and actually, it's one of my most popular interviews. I wonder why.
Let's just say it was a healthy discussion.
Yeah. So on that note, everyone, stay heroic. We'll see you in the next ones.
Bye-bye.